Alright, good evening folks, it's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to another Short War video, and today marks day 4 of the invasion by Ukrainian forces into mainland Russian territory, and right now in the border town of Sudska, which is on the Russian side and also is ground zero of this invasion. We're currently seeing Ukrainian forces move around that town largely unopposed by Russian forces, and also it appears the entire town has been abandoned by the Russian civilians, which means that the Ukrainian forces are probably in full control of that town, and also we have more confirmation of that. And also we're hearing around the territory of the Kursk nuclear power plant, there are currently major explosions happening in the proximity of that plant, and also we're being told that Russian soldiers are preparing to lock down the plant in preparation for an invasion by the Ukrainian forces on the facility. And finally we're hearing of major drone attacks happening around mainland Russia as the Russians desperately tried to ward off the Ukrainians at the Russian border. But with that, we're jumping into our first article here, which goes to Nexta. And right here in this post we can see Ukrainian soldiers have been spotted in Sudska, and specifically we have a photo of a Ukrainian soldier near a grocery store in the city of Sudska in the Kursk region, and it's spreading around very rapidly online. And this store is located allegedly 10 kilometers from the state border with Ukraine. And also noted right here, the Russian propagandists claimed that Ukrainian forces failed to take the town, and that's totally false. As we see right here around the grocery store, which is in the middle of Sudska, there is a Ukrainian soldier wearing the blue armband, clearly marking that they are Ukrainian and they are here to stay. And here is a Google Maps image of that store. So clearly the Ukrainians are here, and we have even more proof of that in our next post right here, which goes to Max24. And believe it or not, the Ukrainian forces have officially taken full control of the town of Sudska, according to what these soldiers are saying in the video. And unfortunately I don't have a translation to show you, so it's kind of pointless to watch the video because it's not translated to English. But these soldiers are basically saying that the entire town is theirs, they have it under control, and as you can see they're standing in front of the Gazprom office right there in the middle of the town. So it is a done deal. The Ukrainians have moved very rapidly, taken a lot of ground very quickly, and now they're in full control of the Russian controlled border town of Sudska. So a very big victory indeed. And with that, we're moving on to our next article here, and this one goes to us on Twitter at It's the Enforcer. And in this post right here, we have footage which appears to show the streets of Sudska in the Kursk region of Russia are completely deserted, and also there's not a sign of any life except for the Ukrainian soldiers in the entire city, suggesting that all the Russians have fled, and the people that are left are simply very far and few in between that are also mixed in with the Ukrainian soldiers. But with that, let's take a look at the video and see just how barren the actual city is. But as you can see right here, the civilian is actually driving around and filming all the carnage left behind for the battle for the town of Sudska, and you can see that the entire place appears to be abandoned, and there's a lot of burned out equipment on the side of the road right here. It looks like Russian equipment as well. But the Russians really did not put up that good of a fight because the entire town has been taken by the Ukrainians now, and it is a done deal. So not good for the Russians whatsoever, and a lot of the Russians actually fled. They just basically cowardly ran off from the entire town and weren't willing to fight for it. So now the Ukrainians control it and the town is deserted. But with that, moving into our next article here, this one goes to Blaskovka. And in this post right here, we get more news about the Kursk nuclear power plant, and right now the Ukrainians are really moving in very close to that plant, and right now we're hearing explosions in Kurchatov, which is very close to the Kursk NPP, and this was reported by the mayor's advisor of temporarily occupied Mariupol. And meanwhile, Russian media writes that all the entrances to the nuclear power plant have been blocked and everything is de-energized at the units of the power plant under construction, and also the builders have left the building. So keep in mind though that while there are some reactors under construction, there are 2 active nuclear reactors at this facility. So if Ukraine were able to take this entire place, that would be a very big leverage over the Russians, because obviously that controls a lot of power going to the region of Kursk, and if the Ukrainians were able to take it, that would allow them to basically negotiate with the Russian government to get their power station back. But let's take a look at the video and see how big the explosion really was. So here's the video right here. And you can hear in the background a very large explosion right near the nuclear power plant itself, and unfortunately we cannot see the ground, so we're really not sure exactly where this is in proximity to the plant, but we know it's very close by in Kurchatov. So a very big piece of news right there, and also very interesting that the Russians are getting ready to defend that plant because the Ukrainians are advancing so rapidly. And with that, we're moving into our next post here, which goes to Osin Yuri, and we get more confirmation that all construction at the plant has been shut down, and also the Russian forces are indeed speed, preparing to defend it. And also we can see in the post right here that from a Russian source, it appears that after lunch on August the 9th, which was today, the approaches to the Kursk NPP were blocked off completely. So I don't think that's going to hold off the Ukrainian advance, because so far we've seen all the Russian efforts to stop the Ukrainians have failed. And I think this will also fail at the nuclear power plant, and we could be looking at a potential capture of this facility by Ukrainian forces, maybe even as early as the next 72 hours. So that would be quite a feat if they were able to take it, and also a very big victory for the Ukrainians. But with that, we're jumping into our next article here, and this one goes to Null Reports. And also remember, I mentioned some very big drone attacks happening in mainland Russia by the Ukrainian forces, and in this one right here, we see that last night, Ukrainian drones struck a Russian repair base in Novy Oskol in the Belgorod region, and according to Russian sources, 7 drones hit the base, damaging 2 hangars and also 3 military vehicles. So let's take a look at the damage. And as you can see right here, the entire building is on fire. It looks like this entire hangar, or whatever this is burning, and it's up in flames. And there's the infamous Russian fire department right there on the left, waiting to get involved and turn this into a clown show, because they're not going to be able to put that out once again. I would say the Russian fire department is probably the most incompetent fire department on the face of the earth, and this is another incident which they're probably not going to be able to get under control. But there you go, significant damage. And also, this Russian repair base in Novy Oskol was not the only casualty that came out from last night. And in our next post here from Kyiv Post, we're learning that overnight, massive explosions in the area of a military airbase in Russia's Lipetsk region appears to have been damaged severely in a large-scale drone attack by Ukrainian forces. So let's take a look at this video and see the absolute fireworks show going off in Lipetsk. And right out here in the distance is the Lipetsk airfield, and as you can see, it is going up in blazes, and there appears to be several Ukrainian drones hitting that airbase out there, and it is severe damage happening. It looks like a fireworks show, like I mentioned a moment ago, and that is huge damage, and we're learning that the damage was much more extensive than previously expected. And with that, we're moving into our next post here, which goes to Konstantin, and we're also seeing that we saw footage of the drones coming into Lipetsk, the actual city of Lipetsk, and it was filmed by Russian civilians on the ground in very up-close footage. So let's take a look and see what we have. And right here you see there's the drone flying right overhead of the Russian civilians at a bus stop, and we actually saw this last night, and there's a Russian civilian getting up and running off for his life after he saw the incoming arrival heading toward the airbase. So very interesting to see this flying right overhead of the Russian civilians right over the town of Lipetsk. But with that, we're moving into our next article here, and this one goes to Jason J. Smart. And y'all might vaguely recall the Russian column that arrived from the Russian-backed Donetsk People's Republic to assist in defending Kursk. That column is no longer in service. As you can see up here at 419, there was the column on the side of the road, and at 420, this was the column right here on fire and burning up, a mess right there on the side of the road, and it was completely taken out by the Ukrainians. So what do the Russians do now that this entire column's been taken out? Well, we learned that here in our next post from War Translated. And we can see that just 12 hours after the destruction of that Russian column, which we just saw burning in flames, with a dozen vehicles in the Kursk zone, Russia is now bringing up even more Russian columns to be destroyed. So as you can see, let's take a look at this video right here to show you the columns coming in. And there you have it. They're rolling in just like they did before. And if it happens again, this column right here is about to be completely taken out by Ukrainian drones, because right now the Russians are really on the defensive, and they really don't have much defenses to defend against air attacks by the Ukrainians. And I think this column might meet the same fate as the other one. So it appears they're being insane here. They're doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result. But with that, we're moving into our next post, which goes to Visegrad 24. And not only are the Russian columns in trouble, but also we're hearing incoming reports stating that the Ukrainian army has encircled 2 Russian battalions, and that's correct, 2 Russian battalions. Those are large units right there near the town of Sudska in the Kursk region of Russia. And currently the Russian 17th Battalion of the 488th Regiment and the 31st Battalion of the 102nd are reportedly in serious trouble as the Ukrainians continue advancing toward the city of Kursk. So like we said last night as well, it sounds like the battalions that are left behind to protect the Russian mainland are very ill-equipped and also under-trained, because for the Ukrainians to encircle 2 entire battalions, that is quite a feat. That's no small task right there, and the Ukrainians have done that very rapidly, once again showing that this was a concerted effort by the Ukrainians to go into Russian territory, take it, and also encircle everything the Russians have, and immediately plow their way toward Kursk and or Belgorod from within the territory. So a very big victory. But moving on here to our next post, we have one from Nexta. And also, not only is the Russian military screwing up big time, but now we're seeing the Russian reporters screw up big time. And in this post right here, we see a Russian TV channel presenter literally showed the live exact location of the movement of the Russian convoys of equipment and personnel into the Kursk region. So let's take a look at the goober giving away this very sensitive intel. He said, right now there's another batch of military equipment coming from Kursk to our positions. As you can see right behind me, here's the location. Look right here for yourself. He said, now I see self-propelled artillery units and armored vehicles and everything to strengthen the positions of our fighters. And he has the biggest scoop of his life right here. He is showing the Ukrainian forces exactly where this equipment is, so that way they can come in with their air attacks and bomb the hell out of this equipment right here. So great job to this reporter right here. He did a number for the Ukrainians. I'm sure they'd love to put him on the payroll because he's doing a fantastic job. He's the MVP for the Ukrainians at this point, and he's a Russian reporter who supports the Russian government. So very ironic here, and also very good to see. And with that, we're moving into our next article here, which goes to Nexta once again, and in this article, we get a better idea of just how many forces are involved in this invasion of mainland Russian territory. And according to Forbes, reportedly, up to 10,000 Ukrainian military may be involved in the operation in the Kursk region, and quote-unquote, it's becoming clearer by the hour that is what happening in Kursk is not a raid, and it's really an invasion, writes the American Forbes. And journalists note that this operation is very different from previous raids into Russian territory, and it involves at least 3 brigades, each with up to 2,000 troops. And once again, the Enforcer channel was first to the punch because it looks like the American journalists, the mainstream journalists, are just now realizing that this is not a raid and it's an invasion. And we actually called this about 3 days ago, about 24 hours after it started, that it was not a raid, because before we'd seen the Freedom of Russia Legion go into Russia, and those were raids. They went in and immediately withdrew after they caused some havoc, but this is a new front being opened by the Ukrainians into Russian territory because a whopping 10,000 troops may be involved in the operation, and that is a lot of forces being put into Russia, and that is why they're able to move through so quickly through Russian territory and achieve their objectives. But with that, we have one more piece of news for the day, and this final article right here goes to Guy Elster. And we have just a little bit of news from the Middle East, as things still boil over there, but it seems like the invasion of Russia seems to have buried that story somewhat, even though it's still a very big one. Right now, we're learning that Iran's new president is battling the IRGC in an attempt to prevent an all-out war with Israel, according to The Telegraph. And the post goes on to say that top generals in the IRGC are insisting on a direct strike on Tel Aviv and other Israeli cities, focusing on military bases to avoid civilian casualties in response to the killing of Hamas leader Haniyeh in Tehran, but the president has suggested targeting secret Israeli bases in Iran's neighboring countries, as it did in the past, and before the first ever direct attack on Israel in April. So allow me to translate the Iranian president's words, because he was very vocal about going in and making Israel pay a short while ago, but now he's having cold feet, and that's probably because the screaming eagles of the American military have showed up in mass in the region, and Iran knows that if they act too swiftly against the Israelis, then they're probably going to get glassed. So that's why they're suddenly having cold feet, but nonetheless though, I think the attack will still happen, and it's still going to go down and escalate severely, but only time will tell just how bad of an attack it really is. But with that, that is actually our last piece of news for the day. So if you found today's video informative, please press the like button, and also subscribe to the channel as well, because we love to see when people love the work that we're putting out, and also the short war summaries, because we love keeping up with the news and keeping y'all informed as well, and we appreciate all the support. And also, if you want to support our channel financially, you can do so on our Patreon page, and the link is in the description below for that, where you can go over to Patreon, sign up for a monthly membership, and that greatly helps us keep the channel running with that financial support. And with that, we'll see you all at 10 p.m. Eastern tonight on our next Nightly War News stream, and with that, bye-bye for now.